Welcome everybody to the museum. What an amazing series this has been, and I want to thank everybody so much for their support. A couple of special thank yous to actually the sponsors of this particular speaker series, and that's Steve and Karen Kimmerly. Thank you so much, so you guys for all your support and helping to fund this. Yeah, please. And also our sponsors, Dick and Lucille Sharkey. Thank you so much. And thanks to John for manning our little booth over there for all the valuable information that's available to all the veterans. What can I say? You know, this is really living history, and what a unique opportunity we all have to hear these stories, not only hear them, but document them through PCA, so these can be kind of relived for future generations. It's nice to see the younger crowd here kind of absorbing all this too. So again, a big heartfelt thanks. If you're not a museum member, please consider becoming one. Tomorrow is our last speaker. That'll be from Vet Connect. So this is more of an informational thing for the veterans. What are the different services available to them? We're going to probably do a little coming home party. So if you like cake and coffee, you might want to come back around 3 or 4 o'clock. Should be fun. With that, our speaker today, Yimmy Pera, Special Forces, Iraq and Afghanistan. Jimmy.
Seat or kind of a bad hit by coach wrestling, and kind of put my carriage before the horse and didn't stretch out and wrestled a 215-pounder and ended up kind of pulling my leg. It is what it is, right? So take a seat here. My name is Yimmy Pera. I'm the veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. 2001, I was with the Ranger Regiment in Fort Benning, Georgia, and on September 11th, remember that morning before we found out about the events, woke up, normal morning. I was getting ready to wind down being in the Army because come that following March in 2002, I was going to ETS and just come back home to Petaluma and go to school and do what my mom wanted me to do, go to school and stay home. But things changed at around 9 o'clock that morning. We came after PT, I showered and went to the chow hall, had food, and went back and changed into my uniform, time BDUs. It was really clear. It was blue skies, not a cloud in the sky. And I remember that morning, it's really funny, I was listening to Frank Sinatra I had a CD, and I was listening to Frank Sinatra in my room. And I was like, I only have so many more months in the Army and I'm done. It's not, I'm not gonna ever wear a uniform again. But went up, reported into 1st Platoon. My platoon sergeant was in there, and he was bothering me about re-enlisting because it was coming, short time, and he thought he was gonna rip my arm off and beat me up and close the door. And I said, he's a tough old Ranger E7. Now he's the regimental sergeant major, from what I understand, down at Fort Benning. So I walk in and I'm sitting down and hearing about what's going on for the day's events. We have a medical class that day in the headquarters classroom, and he tells me, he turns around and says, "Hey, a plane hit the World Trade Center," and we're thinking, we're pretty aware about what's going on in the world, but at the time we didn't think anything about terrorism. We thought it was just some pilot that didn't know what he was doing, and then I brought up a point that, hey, after World War II, a plane hit the Empire State Building, I guess, showboat. And so, the time went on, and we turned the news on, and just like anybody else, we saw the smoke coming from the building, and I said, well, it's pretty big. Kept going, doing my thing. My buddy, the same name, Jimmy, came in, and he was getting ready for the E6 board, become a staff sergeant, and he was getting his packet together. So I'm sitting there, and I was looking at TV, and then the second plane hit, and I yelled, and a couple of explicits, and yelled and cussed and ran over until he dropped his packet on the ground, and we went outside and started yelling into the common area that another plane hit the World Trade Center. And granted, we're at Fort Benning, Georgia, and it's a pretty significant event to be at the home of the infantry within the Rangers, and something like this happening. And on the side note, in 1963, my dad was on the swing landing trainer at Airborne School at Fort Benning when John F. Kennedy got assassinated. So two major events, me and my dad were within 1 mile of each other, almost 40 plus years later. And from that point forward, they locked down the Ranger Regiment, posted guard. Fort Benning was locked down. People were running around with their hair on fire, trying to find out what was going on. Nobody knew what was happening. They told us to just stop what we were doing. We were doing what, at the time, we were getting ready to do what you call a squad eval, or platoon evals. Well, you'd have to road march 15 miles out into the woods and then do live fires and stay out for a week and get evaluated by, our superiors from different companies to see which company, if we completed each of the tasks of what we were supposed to be doing as far as training went. But as Alpha Company was coming in, I believe it was Alpha Company, I was in Bravo Company, they ceased all training. They stopped all training. They brought everybody in, and I remember everybody was just looking at each other. I was kind of an older guy. I was 22, so I look at the you have your 18 and 19-year-old and 20-year-old kids, and then I was an E5 sergeant, so I was kind of like the older. I was a senior team leader in the company, which means after being a team leader, you become squad leader. But I was next in line. I actually became a squad leader at that time because the actual squad leader that was in my platoon, that was in my 3rd squad, he was at a school in Canada, a Pathfinder school up there. And later I got to talking to him before he came back, and he rejoined us, but he was up there, he thought they were doing a scenario in training when he heard about the planes hitting the World Trade Center. So they brought he goes, oh, we need to talk to all the Americans, and they got into a van and they were driving, and plane hit the World Trade Center. He told me, when he was up there at the school, they looked at each other and they're like, yeah, right, okay, okay, this is a scenario that we're going to be a part of. And then the Canadians said, no, this is a real world, this happened. They drove them to a place, turned the TV on, and they were just like, we need to get back to our units. We can't be here anymore, we got to go. But until he came back, I ran a squad and trained the guys at 3rd Platoon 1st Squad, Eco 375, and when he came back, I went back to being a team leader, and we prepared to deploy. So within about a month, not even within a month, within about 3 weeks, we had our bags packed, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, we got in our buses, and we drove to this part of the airfield at Fort Benning, through this back gate, and drove through, and we're sitting in the back of the bus laughing and joking, hey, we're going to, we don't know where we're going yet, kind of an idea, So I look at my squad leader's name was DeLong, and I said, well, I guess they say everything happens every 4 or 5 years. There's going to be some kind of a conflict. Before that it had been Kosovo, and before that, about 4 or 5 years before that, it was Somalia. And Somalia was October 3rd, 1993. And ironically, I was assigned to that same company that was in that firefight. But obviously I was not there. I was a senior in high school at Casa Grande. So when we came in, we saw all the pallets being moved around and being put up in the plane. We got out of the bus. We had our they call it salt bag, with our with essentials, because all our other bags were getting shipped. Had our rifle, and as we walked to the airplane, we saw we called them the old timers, the Vietnam vets that were helping. They were working GS jobs, the government jobs that they use after they get retired. They were standing there in line, and they had this really distraught look on their face, and we're just like, we had not yet seen what they had seen, and not yet felt what they had felt. This is, beginning of October of 2001, and the invasion happened October 19th, so it hadn't happened yet. I mean, the bombing of the Taliban began, but the next phase of the ground war hadn't started yet. So we're getting up on into the C5, and I look up on the back of the C5, and all the Air Force birds have the base of where they're from. And I looked up, and it said Travis. So I go, this plane's from where I'm from. It's from my hometown. Well, pretty much from back home. And I got in. In a way, sometimes I feel like if you see something that looks, friendly enough, then that's a good sign. So we got on the plane, but I remember this one vet. He was saying that he just was shaking all of our hands, like it was almost like he wanted to grab a rifle and jump on with us, but he couldn't, you know. So we got on and flew to was it Bangor, Maine? We flew up, landed, and we got out. You know, took a couple hours break, but on the flight up there, the pilot, I had to find out where these guys lived. You know what I mean? They're from Travis, so they're locals. So they let us like 3 or 4 at a time go up to where the cockpit was. I got up there by the time we were flying like over the area where you could see the lights of Baltimore and Washington and over Philadelphia. But we were high enough where you could see the lights. They're like, well, that's Philadelphia over there, and Baltimore and Washington over here. And so I started asking them. You know, they obviously live in the Fairfield area, so you know, we went back. We landed in Newfoundland and then or Maine, and then from there it was another 18 or so hours to our next destination, where they dropped us off and we got off the plane, and the guys that were sent forward were waiting for us. So we greeted each other like most soldiers do, you know, call each other a few names when we saw each other, and you know, it's good to see you, you know what, and this blah blah blah, and where we need to go. And then one of my buddies, who was my roommate, he always was bouncing off. So Pera, get your, you know what, over there, blah, blah, blah. And he gave him his greeting and went on my way. We got our bags, and we were told that there was another place that we were going to go to, our platoon, and one other platoon. And we ended up boarding helicopters that morning to the USS Kitty Hawk. So they flew us by CH-46's naval version of the Chinook. They flew us out from where we were at, over the ocean, and all of a sudden we came through the fog and we landed right on an aircraft carrier. On an aircraft carrier, you know. So we landed, and that's where we were at. Come October 19th, when the first day of the ground war happened, we were on the Kitty Hawk, and we were preparing to do helicopter missions into Pakistan along the Afghan border, while the other elements in our battalion were doing the airborne jump into what was known as Objective Rhino at the time. Rhino was a objective in Afghanistan that the 3rd Ranger Battalion jumped into, secured, and which later became a Marine Corps base. They called it Camp Rhino. But that night, one of the helicopters. Let me back up a minute. On the aircraft carrier, while we were getting prepared to move out, Blackhawks and Chinooks were getting ready to take Rangers to any destination they were going to. Other elements that were in the special operations were there, also going to their objectives, getting prepared to go. And when one of the platoons got sent up to the mission, I remember the chaplains going out to each of the helicopters and doing their prayers and getting ready to go, and we knew it was for real that night. It's going. We're moving out that night. And we got to talking, saying that we're the only people around that knows that everybody knows it's coming, but we know it's going to happen now, and nobody else yet knows that it's coming until they won't find out till tomorrow or the day after. And so we prepared. We got everybody that was going to be going on the mission suited up. They put the little there's these little, what do they call it, the life preservers you put under your arms, just if you're flying over a body of water, just in case something happens. You can pop them, you can float. I was helping the guys load up with that, and the machine gunners getting their belt ammunition together, and helping load magazines, and just getting everything that they needed if they were going to get into a sustained firefight and get them ready and prepared. There was 2 individuals in my platoon named Chris Stonecipher and John Edmonds. And Edmonds was a graduate of Ranger School, and Stonecipher had gotten injured in Ranger School and came back early and had a cast on his, I believe, on his leg. And when deployment was told to come, it was going to happen, it was inevitable. He's cut his cast off and said, "I'm fine. I got to go. I want to go with. I want to go." So they were aboard one of the Blackhawks that was supposed to fly into a fueling and reammunition point. On the way there, the pilot experienced a malfunction and a brownout, and the helicopter ended up crashing. And Edmonds fell back in the helicopter and hit Stonecipher. As the bird fell over, they fell out, and they were killed. They were the first 2 combat deaths of the war. first death of Operation Enduring Freedom was an Air Force, I believe, Air Force sergeant. The first 2 combat casualties, KIAs in the war, were from my platoon, Stone Cipher and Edmonds. And then later on, from enemy fire, it was the first group, Green Beret, and it was in later months into the end of December. That night, the objectives were hit, and the beginning of the ground war began officially that night. Everybody knows, or I don't know if you've heard about the Special Forces teams that were in there before, that were setting all the objectives up. They were in there on horseback, making link-ups with what you would call at the time the Northern Alliance, with Massoud, General Massoud's army that was fighting against the Taliban. It was a sustained war since the 90s. And the Taliban obviously was allied with Al-Qaeda and cut deals with bin Laden, and that's why we were hitting the Taliban locations and the Al-Qaeda positions. As far as Northern Alliance, from that point forward, from October 19th, with the help of Special Operations, the Rangers, Special Forces, the Green Berets, and the Navy SEALs, along with air power, they pounded the Taliban into full retreat. Well, as you can see now, it's 10 years later, and there's still a sustained fight along the border, and they're in Pakistan. That was my first deployment. Didn't do too much. We just, we went and we did what we needed to do, and went to a place in Uzbekistan down into Mazar-e-Sharif, northern Afghanistan. We were there on a mission about a few days before the prison uprising where Johnny Spann was killed, the CIA agent. Matter of fact, on our way back, we landed in an airfield in Pakistan and had Thanksgiving in Pakistan on an airfield. Went to this air hangar, and bat droppings were everywhere. But it was, it was nice to see, other soldiers. They were from the 101st Airborne, and they were there. Walked into the little chow hall, and a colonel was serving food, and it was Thanksgiving, so you feel a little, you have a rifle and you're not at home, you're in Pakistan, but it's still a warm feeling that you're around fellow Americans during the holidays, at least at that point. But then I came home, and I decided that I wanted to re-enlist, and the war's going on, and it doesn't, I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't want to get out at that point. I told my mom and dad, they were like, well, just get out and you come home and go to school. At that point, I couldn't do it. On active duty, I had done Special Forces selection and got selected, but I didn't yet go to the Q course, for the Special Forces Q course, which is at Fort Bragg. So I decided to, at that point, well, hey, you know what, I'm gonna go become a Green Beret. And that's when I decided in 2002 to go to Fort Bragg and go there for a little over a year and a half to become qualified as a weapons sergeant in 18 Bravo. And then came back and was with 19th Special Forces Group. And we deployed to places like Thailand and South Korea and a few other places in Southeast Asia to do some training and to link up with other militaries and to do foreign internal defense missions until 2007, when we got the call to go for 12-month mobilization to go to Iraq. In the summer of '07, we did our train up, and then we ended up going to Baghdad, and we were assigned to an Iraqi Special Operations Force unit, the Iraqi Counterterrorism Force, and the Iraqi Commandos, which were they were very good at what they did. They had been in a sustained war for 4 years. They knew how to clear rooms just as good as any American unit. They carried out missions just as effectively as any American infantry unit, and they were well disciplined. They were a lot more disciplined than other Iraqi units, and they were very much trusted because they were vetted very well. We did missions I worked with them for almost 9 months. We're doing missions in Balad, which is north of Baghdad, to places in Mahmoudiya, which is south of Baghdad, and in and around Baghdad to places like Sadr City and New Baghdad. Now, we had some skirmishes when we first got there, going into the holidays, and then the early part of 2008, we the mission tempo, the op tempo started getting a little bit more heavy. Because if you look towards April and May of 2008, there was the spring offensive of 2008. That's what they called it, down in Basra and in Baghdad, at Sadr City. They called it the Battle of Sadr City and the Battle of Basra. Well, it began at the end of March of 2008, and the beginning of that happened when two of our teams were in Basra, and they were in two big firefights 2 nights in a row. They ended up killing a bunch of what they called the Mahdi army that were funded by Iran. They were the Shia that were funded from the eastern part of Iraq, predominantly by Iran, and they were separate from the Sunni population, but they were heavily funded by Iran. Up in Baghdad and Sadr City, it was a huge hub. The city's about 12.5 square miles. Roughly, well, Petaluma is 12.5 square miles, but it's not in a square. Well, their population there is 2.5 million or so. So that's close to the population of Chicago at 12.5 million, or at 12.5 mile square radius. And we got reports that Hezbollah was bringing fighters in, which kind of excited us a little bit because we didn't, they were the ones who were, responsible for the 83 bombing of the Beirut barracks, killed Marines and soldiers. They were before 2001 the deadliest terrorist organization in the world, run by Abu Nidal out of Beirut. But as March progressed towards the end and April began, I have it on this display over here, some bulletproof glass and an explanation of what happened on March 30th of that year. We got into a 4.5 hour firefight in New Baghdad, right next to Sadr City. The Mahdi army had set up an ambush for us, and we went into an objective to free a reported hostage that was taken. Well, it turned out that wasn't the case. We went in about 6:30 in the morning. We rolled into position. It was quiet. It was a Sunday, and it was kind of an eerie feeling, because when you're in a place where there's a war going on and you don't hear anything going on, and it's really deathly quiet, you know something's wrong. And when you feel something's wrong, then usually something is wrong. And an element was coming in to replace another element that we were attached to, and the whole way in there, I kind of kicked my buddy down there. I go, hey, I go, it's Sunday. I go, they must be all at church, just kick, church. You're in Iraq, there's not very many churches going on. But we ended up rolling up down Route Irish and headed up the peninsula towards New Baghdad to go to where our objective was. And as we were rolling up, we saw 2 truckloads of guys just come running straight across, and they got into 2 trucks. There's about 8 of them. They took off, driving away. And I say, look, we got movers in the front, military-age males, about 8 of them, moving into 2 trucks. Moving up to the next intersection, they took a right turn, keep an eye on them. Or if anybody's watching from above, keep an eye on them. And probably about 15 to 20 seconds later, machine gun fire opened up on us from the building to would be my 11 o'clock, which is to my left, and from my 9, which is to my direct left. I returned fire with I had an M134 minigun. I engaged enemy targets within the 3-story building, and to include the mosque next to the street, across the street, where gunmen were coming out of, and they were firing from the rooftop. I radioed back that we made contact. It's kind of obvious at that point, but I was directing where the fire was coming from, so if the other gunners behind me were going to engage, they would know. And the other gunners behind me were Iraqi gunners, but they were really good at what they did. We returned fire. We were there for about 15 or 20 minutes, exchanging fire. Then we decided we needed to move towards our objective. So we moved up to the next intersection. We took a right turn, and as we were rolling down, my gun got jammed, the belt, so I was fixing on the gun. And we came up to the next intersection and took another right turn. And as we took that right turn, right to our immediate left was a T intersection. And as we were going through the T intersection, and one of our trucks moved up kind of in front of, to the side of ours, kind of staggered to the left, and IED went off and hit the back end of the back two vehicles, hit the back end of mine, blew out all the tires on the side of the Humvee, tattered both doors and all the glass with shrapnel. And I felt like actually, when I felt the concussion from the blast, I actually felt like I got punched in the back of the head and in the nose at the same time, because the overpressure that comes through, that comes down. It's like, it felt like boom, and I saw the dust come up, and I looked down into the turret, and I go, is that an IED? And then my buddy looks at me, you're goddamn right, it's an IED. I go, you know, I said, okay, now this is starting to escalate to something bigger than we thought it was going to be. From above, they said that there was movers on the rooftop, which means that there was suspected enemy on the rooftop. The target building, when the IED went off, a gunman ran back into the building, and they said, hey, be aware that there's movement into the target building. There's movers on the roof. And as we came through the intersection, our 50 cal gunners opened up on the intersection because there was gunmen firing at us at that point. As we moved up, we took another left turn where one of our interpreters yelled out to stop real quick. He yelled out, stop, stop, stop. He's all, stop, stop, stop. So we stopped our vehicle, and he saw a crush wire in the street that was going right across the middle of the street, and it was right in front of our vehicle. And we called the Navy EOD up, and it was right into one of these big giant pots. It was an IED that was up, I believe it was hooked into either into a light pole or into the side of the intersection, which would have blown out again, hitting our left side once more. So as we looked, we stopped. The EOD guy did his thing. I'm sure some of you probably watched that EOD show that's been on. They've got a pretty hectic and pretty dangerous job, and a pretty important job. It saves a lot of lives. After defusing it, we moved up, took another left, and we went to the target house. As we pulled up in front of the target area, the assaulters moved up, and they went in, and they didn't find anybody inside. They found a house with some women and some kids in there, and the women were giggling. They were laughing, like, we got you. So they were just looking around, like, hey, we don't have any, there's nothing here. We have nothing. We just have a house full of, they have women and kids that are in here. The women were very mouthy and giggling and laughing. They were supporters of the Mahdi army, but they didn't do anything. They just looked around, made sure everything was fine. We secured the street. When I saw a shadow coming up around the corner, and I see this guy creeping up, I go, who's creeping up on the corner? And I'm looking, and I look over at my sergeant. I go, Mike, because we're in a different community in SF. We call each other by our first names and everything. We're not like Sergeant, sometimes. I go, Mike, look at the corner. I go, there's a guy coming. There's a guy coming around the corner, and he was dismounted, and he was looking over at me, and he looked over. The guy came around the corner, and he was up on his toes, and he was going like this. He had in his hand what it looked like a clacker, and he was pointing up on his toes, and he was like aiming it towards my sergeant, which would be like the direction of the lady and gentleman sitting up there on the steps. And I'm looking back, and you take a double take, because you're trained as an American soldier. You identify a weapon. You identify a rifle, you identify an RPG, you identify a machine gun, you identify something that is going to shoot you. In this war, you learn to identify garage door openers or cell phones or things that are pointed right at you, and it's a realistic, threat. Well, I saw this, and so what we did is we fired back. I fired back at him, and he went back around the corner, but in the middle of the street, right in front of him, an IED went off in the middle of the street. So what I gathered from that was that the reason why he was up on his toes is because he knew that the direct line of the radio wave this way would have blown up that one, but he was wanting to get one up on our corner. So what we did was we moved away, we moved up the street, we pulled everybody, reassessed the situation, and then we moved out from there. We were taking sporadic fire at that time. As we were going to link up with the other element that were with us, we had a three vehicle break-in contact, because dust was coming up, and the driver that was driving was a newer driver, so he didn't get to the point where I was kind of kicking him not kicking him, but nudging him, saying, slow down, slow down, slow down. Because a sustained rate, you're really driving only about 15 miles an hour. You're not driving at 35, 40 like you are around Petaluma. You've got to keep it within 10 to 15 miles an hour with an element of vehicles, so you don't get spread out thin, and you don't end up alone somewhere. Well, the third vehicle back, I kept looking back, I was telling them to slow down, but the third vehicle back had lost contact with the fourth vehicle because of the cloud of dust. So we kept going up and we ended up stopping and tried to make radio contact with the rest of the element. Turns out we saw vehicles pulling in and gunmen were getting out and running into the neighborhood. So they're firing at us, we're returning fire at them, but we're keeping calm that we need to assess where the other element's at. The rest of the guys, you know what I mean? We need to get back to these guys, you know. So after about 10 minutes of this, and 10 minutes there is a long time. That's not like, 10 minutes and, Seinfeld's on. It's 10 minutes that you're under fire, and it's not a situation where you pretty much want to be in. From the forward operating base, Loyalty, which was to our north from where we were at, there was helicopters flying over, and I was like, well, why don't they radio something in? Why doesn't somebody say something to them? Well, it turns out they didn't know what was going on. Granted, you take for granted that you're in the middle of something and everybody else knows, but they're shuttling people to the green zone and back, wherever. And ended up, gunmen were maneuvering on us. We were returning fire. We were eliminating threats as we were going. We turned around after we found out where we were at, where the other group of our guys were at, and we made a mistake. We went back down the same road that we came down. You never want to retrace your steps of where you've been at, because what happens is people, they're waiting for you. It's a cardinal sin. You don't do that. It's one of the violations of the basic rules of patrolling. Don't ever go down the same path twice, especially within the same half hour. Well, being that we were taking fire from this side, we needed to come around, and we took the chance. As we were coming through the intersection, I saw a guy on the corner talking on his cell phone, and he was thumbs up. He was waving, and I didn't do anything to him, because that's a discipline you have as a soldier. You just don't go around blowing people away. Okay, justifiably, what was about to come explained why that guy was on the corner. He was on the corner talking on his cell phone. As we rolled up, probably about, I'd say for about 40 yards, 40, 50 yards more down, maybe 60. We rolled near a T intersection. I was looking this way, I was looking up, I was looking at the street, looking forward. As we rolled up into the T intersection, 6 enemy gunmen came out of the intersection, and 2 from the front, and began opening fire on my Humvee. I turned my head to my right, to my 3 o'clock, and I saw movement, and I turned and I looked, and a bullet hit right in front of the glass and shattered right in front of my face. And that's the glass right there on the display where the bullet hole hit. It was right in front of my face, and I went back in the turret, and I heard another round crack right by my ear and hit the gun. And at that point, everything went, it was in slow motion. I don't know if you ever heard of things going in slow motion, but at that point, I came to like a dull, it was a really dull feeling, but it was a feeling like, this is it, I'm done. Like this is it, I'm done. The side of the vehicle was getting shot up. The front of the vehicle was getting hit by AK-47 fire. 6 enemy gunmen on this, or 5 of the 6 had AK-47s, and 1 had a PKM, a belt fed, and was firing at the side of the vehicle. As we rolled through, it was all in slow motion. The Iraqi soldier that was on the 50 cal behind us was on the intersection. He opened up on the intersection and killed all 6 gunmen. The power of a 50 caliber machine gun could bring a plane down. He came through the intersection, he opened up on that intersection, and they were eliminated. The 2 in the front, I don't know what happened to them. I returned fire. I honestly don't know what happened to those guys, but I don't know, they were gone. And we were at that point, I felt the radiator fluid come up over the hood of the car, and I had it on my hands, and made little pieces of glass everywhere. And the gunner behind me, he came through. I mean, the one thing that I thought about after that, if it was all over, because at that point, you don't get nervous until it's all done with. But at that point, when I thought about it, I go, that guy had me. If that glass wasn't there, if this was a year before, or 2 years before they started putting the glass up on the doors, I would have had a bullet right through my forehead, and that would have been it. And that's why I brought it home when I got done with the firefight. When I went up to the mechanic that was there, and I said, hey, take that off and put my name on it. I want to keep it. I go, there's not any problem with me keeping it, right? And he's like, he's like, where am I going to send it to the junkyard? I go, yeah, put it. So I kept it. But going back to to the incident intersection, we kept rolling through, and at this time we're going about 5 miles an hour because our Humvee was overheating. The other Humvees were rolling on rims, and we were just going down the road. And I thought to myself, if we keep making contact like this, we're not going to make it back. We're not going to make it to the link up. But that doesn't mean you quit, right? You fight your way, you fight back to as far as you can get and just keep going. At that point, I was a little nervous, obviously. We rolled up to the next intersection. We looked through it, passed, went straight up to the next one from there, took a left. We're going about 5 miles an hour, you know, we're like, where are these guys at? I started getting a little annoyed. I started yelling, where the hell are these guys at? You know, they're like, they're another, you know, 2,500 meters up this way. Great, 2,500 meters, that's great. That's like over a mile. That's awesome. So, you know, so we're sitting there and we're rolling, and finally we came to another intersection. Gunmen came out, started firing. At this point, I had the minigun was forward, but I had what's called a M249 squad automatic weapon. It's an automatic rifle. I grabbed that and I came over the turret glass and fired back at the enemy and cleared the intersection as the other vehicles came through. That you got to see that the glass on those other vehicles was just shattered. That glass has a bullet hole through it. Imagine one of those, like, just completely shattered on each side. And as we rolled up, I saw hey, we're getting close. We're within, like, you know, we're within 50 meters, blah blah, or you know, 100 meters, blah blah. I see a guy come pop out, and you can tell that he's an American. You know, he pops out, and I'm like, you know what I mean? And I roll in, and he's standing there, and he goes, and I'm like, I said to him, like, look at that. I go, we just got hammered. We just got hammered, and this guy named Brian was out. He was one of the guys. He was in 5th group. He looks at me and goes, Jimmy, dude, what happened? I go, we got smoked. I go, the vehicles were like, he goes, we were watching all the way down the road, and all the vehicles were like bouncing because they were like rolling on the rims, and they could see it overheating the radiator, and it's like, so we went in and they had to put tow bars on our vehicles. They put us in the middle of the convoy. And then I looked over and I see some, you know, one of the locals in the window, like, you know, smiling at me and waving and stuff like that. You know, and I was, you know, looking at him back. He was like on he was on the cell phone, and you know, I said hi back to him a couple times. You know, we were getting ready to move out, and we started rolling. They put the other minigun up in front. My buddy Timmy, he's from Boston. He's a Massachusetts state trooper. He's a Massachusetts state trooper. I hope I got that right. So, you know, out here there's Highway Patrol, they get state troopers everywhere. State, yeah. And he was a Gulf War vet in the Marine Corps, and then he joined the Army and became a Green Beret. And huge Patriots fan. I used to root about the Patriots. But he took over the lead, and as we rolled out, we were heading back to a forward operating base Loyalty, which is right off the main supply route that was there in New Baghdad. As we rolled, we were going down the street. They started dropping mortar fire, and in front of the vehicles in their own neighborhood, they were dropping mortar rounds in. And I heard 50 cal gunfire and minigun fire, and it's weird. I don't know if any of y'all ever heard of or seen, you know, gunfire in a city, or how the sound bounces off the walls. It just it's this roar from the minigun and the pops from the 50 cal. And as we came through, there was a couple of gunmen on the corner, and Timmy saw him coming through the intersection. He saw them. They were getting ready to do another on the corner. They were going to ambush him as he came through the intersection. Well, Timmy turned the minigun, took out the entire corner where all the gunmen were. He said, all I remember is the guy came around the corner and he was getting ready to shoot, and the next thing I saw was his feet in the air, and he was eliminated. We rolled through the intersection, and we saw the Iraqi police from the district that was there. They were all in the police station living over the fence. They all went back to the police station. They didn't want any part of it. And a lot of people get angry about that. They say, well, why didn't they help you out? Why didn't they do this? Well, I mean, once we leave and they're the police in their own neighborhood, what's going to happen to them, right? You know, they have to live amongst the people that are fighting us, right? So what's going to happen? They're going to police up on their own, and then they're going to cause problems for themselves. So in a way, I understood. The Iraqi soldiers didn't understand. They got mad. they didn't understand that. But later on, we're like, well, what are we going to do? Get angry? The locals, the local police that are there, they're not soldiers. They're not supposed to engage the enemy like we are. They're supposed to keep the peace, and they're more of a neutral, force that's there. Granted, sometimes you're like, what's wrong with these guys? But later, as the mission went forward, you understood where they stood and why they stood the way they stood. Because after we leave the country, they still got to be there amongst themselves. As this was going on with the standing up to Muqtada al-Sadr's Mahdi army, who was funded by Iran, the Al-Qaeda threat in the country was dwindled down, and that had to do with the awakening. I'm sure some of you have heard of that. I don't know if they were the locals that stood up. Some of them were insurgents at the time, and at the beginning of the war, they took the side of Al-Qaeda, but then they found out that Al-Qaeda was not good for Iraq, and that U.S. forces went in and said, hey, look, we're here. Arm yourselves, police your own streets. We're down the street if you need us. And from that, we gained their trust that, hey, we're not here to occupy you as much as we are to hand it back over to you. So they pretty much, along with the coalition, smashed out the Al-Qaeda threat in Iraq. But that left the Mahdi army and the Iranian threat that was still there. So from the end of March until we started going into Sadr City itself, that was probably the main threat, which could, honestly, when we would go into Sadr City, it was about the time that, I don't know how many of you, anybody seen that 60 Minutes episode with Leslie Stahl about Sadr City, the Battle of Sadr City, where they were putting up the T-walls with the engineers, and 4th ID, and the CAV was there, and we'd go in there into missions, and T-walls were up, but you really couldn't drive vehicles in there because the whole place was tattered with IEDs all up and down the road. So we'd go to whatever location we needed to go to, and then we'd walk in and go to whatever objective we needed and grabbed up where we needed and walked out. And sometimes we ended up getting into skirmishes and into engagements, and sometimes we'd go right in and come right out. But in that time, about May 15th, or I think it was May 12th, roughly between 12th and 15th, Sadr pleaded for a ceasefire. In other words, he tapped out. He didn't. His Mahdi army couldn't stand up to the USSF, Iraqi Special Operations, and just the fact that his terrorist army was getting pounded out so badly, it wasn't a favorable thing to keep getting hammered like that. They called a ceasefire, and then for the next 2 weeks, we pretty much stood down, packed our stuff, and beginning of June 1st and June 2nd, we got on an airplane and came back, flew back to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. It's kind of a surreal thing. You're like, 1 week you're in a firefight, then you're off mission, and you're getting on a plane, and all of a sudden now you're in Clarksville, Tennessee. It's a little different. But in that time, the major fighting came more so to an end. There were still firefights and skirmishes and bombings and snipings that happened between that point and the eventual pullout, which happened just a few months ago, just about a month ago, we're talking about. That was, one aspect in a couple of days of my deployment over there in Iraq. But I got the display up over there. The picture up there is actually the turret. The glass that's in that picture behind, in the center of the picture is actually the glass that's displayed right down there. That's the minigun. We carried about 9,000 rounds in the truck. 7.62. If you fired a cyclic rate of that for 1 minute, it would fire 3,000 rounds in 1 minute. But you don't want to fire 3,000 rounds in 1 minute because it would melt. But it was a lifesaver. So was those Humvees. I know that they get a shellacking with, they can't withstand this. There's no armored vehicle in the world that could sustain a tank round that's put in the ground as a mine. Those Humvees took a pounding. They took us everywhere that we needed to go, and they brought us back. That one right there, and this other one, one was we called it 54, the other one we called it 52. It was just their numbers. Actually, when I left the country, I kind of, in a way, I kind of had a bondage, with this truck. I grew a bond with both of them because I ran both trucks the whole time I was there, and made sure all the Iraqi guns were up and ready to go and running. But when you leave, I took pictures of it, so I'll probably never see those vehicles again. But at the same time, you never forget them. 9 months of being with a vehicle. And I don't know if there's people that that get tied to a muscle car or a I don't know, whatever they like. But that's something. Those two vehicles I'll never forget. But it is what it is. People have their own opinions and takes on Iraq and Afghanistan, and I personally believe it was worth it. That's why I stayed in. That's why I re-enlisted. And re-enlisted when I was over in Iraq for 6 more years when I was there. That was 3 years ago, so I got 3 more years. And then from that point, I'm about 5 years away from retirement now. So I'll be 40 and I could retire. Not to say I will, but it's just the way, it's the way it goes. You get to that age of like, oh, okay, I'm gonna retire, and then you're like, well, no, I don't think I'm gonna do it. That's what my dad told me, at least. I'm sure Mr. Sharkey would tell you the same thing about retirement. You get to that age where you're eligible and you say, I'm staying.
I wasn't even 39 years old when I retired. 21 years.
21. But you learn a lot about the culture, a lot about the people, a lot about the turmoil that they're in. Different parts of the city of Baghdad had their own personality. You go to one section that was really friendly to you, you go to another section that was your enemy. You just saw it. But most of the time when you get in, they were receptive. New Baghdad and Sadr City were the most dangerous places in the city, to include a district that was in northern Baghdad called Shula. And one night, my buddies went out on a mission, and they went to hit an objective. They got engaged. They were in 45-minute firefight. That was preceded by an IED that went off. Or actually, it wasn't an IED. It was an EFP. And those came from Iran, and they were more powerful than an IED. And what happened was, one of our counterparts in the Iraqi army, Sergeant Major, was killed. He'd been married for 3 weeks at the time, and my buddy Greg, my other buddy Will, who was actually his counterpart. Will was leaving the country soon. They went over to open up the door from the side that it didn't get blasted, and they couldn't recognize who it was. They couldn't recognize anything in the vehicle because it had been so blasted out so badly by this. And those explosive devices that came from Iran, they get so hot when they explode. They're concave, and what happens was, when the explosion happens, they come forward and then they slowly form into a projectile and fly forward. Well, they can cut through armor like a hot butter through knife, or a knife through hot butter. I get it. Something like that. But anyway, it's a devastating weapon, and that's a lot of the stuff that's happening probably now in Afghanistan. When Al-Qaeda and the terrorist movement saw Iraq as a lost cause, they started moving their stuff over to Afghanistan. And what you're seeing there right now is what they're pushing into that front is the roadside bombs and the tactics they used that were subdued in Iraq. But obviously you have that one country in the middle of both that doesn't like us too much, so they'll fund what they can when they can. I've talked enough. I know there's a lot of people here that probably have maybe some questions, maybe some thoughts. I'm open to any questions you want to ask. Anybody have any questions about Iraq or Afghanistan or what's going to happen from here? Sir?
Would you have used air-mobile helicopters more than convoys to kind of eliminate that IED threat?
It depends on what the mission called for. We use helicopters a lot, but it just when it fit for a ground assault or an air assault, it just came down to the decision-making process of the commanders, and that just the type of area, the type of objective, what we needed to do to succeed in the mission. It would come down to to one or the other, and a plan was always made for each contingency. So helicopters were used a lot, and obviously a lot of ground. Yeah.
Firstly, thank you for your service. Secondly, do you see the next conflict as being in Iran?
I see there's a lot of problems with Iran. I know that and it's been since 1979. It doesn't just, it hasn't just occurred. I have a lot of Persian friends. Actually, I've lived with one of my buddies, like an older brother to me. He says that, if you have a radical dictatorial theocracy that's been at war with you for 30 years, you got to acknowledge that. And head to head in the eastern part of Baghdad, they know that they can't go head to head with us with any force. No army in the world can stand up to us. But they can do things to try to ruin the efforts of the movements, like, hey, funding things that are going into Iran or Iraq, or into Afghanistan, or into Beirut, or spreading terror through different parts of different regions of the world. Hezbollah is notorious for doing that. Bombings in South America. If you look at what's going on now with Iran, they have a pretty good relationship with Venezuela. There's a lot of Revolutionary Guardsmen and Quds forces have gone down and linked up with their military to include the FARC, the drug trade, the drug wars. And you've seen a lot of terror that's happening in Mexico. And some of the tactics that have been used in the Middle East are now being used there by the cartels. So that's a threat that needs to be acknowledged. And yes, I do think that we're going to have a bigger problem with them later if they were ever to achieve getting a nuclear weapon, which is going to be even worse.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You mentioned several times about supplies coming in and funding, so it seems inevitable.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Right.
Sooner than later, I don't know. I'm not a politician, and I'm not
Well,
that high
I'm a
level.
Blue Star mum and my friend is, so we,
Yeah.
just for the sake of our children, would like to know
Yeah.
whether it's a possibility.
Yeah. And you got to see who helps them financially and who sends them, support. You watch what goes on in the United Nations, you can see, what goes on there. So,
Thank you.
thank you, and God bless you for your sacrifice. That's the ultimate sacrifice. And to give a child in war, I can't, and I hope I never have to go through that. But God bless you. And what was your child's name?
Oh, yeah.
My daughter's in the Air Force and her name is Cheyenne.
Cheyenne. The Blue Star Mom? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And anybody in here that's a blue or a gold star? Please.
Well, blue.
Blue,
And
yeah.
my son was an Apache helicopter pilot.
Okay. That right there. They were angels. We
Yeah,
saw them
that's what I hear
when we were in
people
Solder City. We were in Solder City, or we were flying around, and we saw Apaches flying around.
Mm-hmm.
They look like wasps. They're flying around, but
Yes, with
friendly to us, yeah. And they fly around, and you always feel better when you hear something, when you hear a buzz in the air, you hear a helicopter in the air somewhere. Even if you can't see it, you're just, you know what? That's somebody watching our back.
Right.
And many times it's in a situation where it's a bad situation, you can find some comfort, and that was comfort.
That was comfort.
Yeah, so you tell him thank you from a ranger and a Green Beret guy that was on the ground. Ma'am?
Are these your pictures?
No, these are not mine.
No, they're not either.
Some of the pictures I have are over here in that display case, but I didn't take too many pictures. I have just a few. Most of the time we operated at night. And we get some sleepers during the day. So it was.
Did your area look like this area?
Well, in certain parts of, I'd say, on the deserty part, I was in the city. I was in Iraq. I was in Baghdad. So unless we flew over, it was weird because it's funny. I asked if you fly over certain parts of Iraq or Afghanistan, it'd be no different than flying over a helicopter over like the Stockton area in Lodi, where you look down and you see the crops and you see the agriculture, and you're like, it doesn't look any different than certain parts of the United States. After I got back from Afghanistan, I went to Utah for some training up in Salt Lake, and looking up at the mountains, I said, there's not much difference in the mountains and the way it looks over here than it does over there. You just don't have the same feeling because, you know, somebody's not trying to kill you in Salt Lake City, you know. But, or the threat's not there, you know. But, you know, it's been 10 years, you know, I mean, you know, it was almost 9 in Iraq and over 10 in Afghanistan. You look at the, you know, the duration of the war, you could say the longest war in American history, and then Vietnam, and co-equally as devastating was the Korean War. You know, technology has helped our situation and our cause. The Vietnam era and the Korean and the World War II era didn't have the type of technology that we had. I mean, if you look at, they didn't have bulletproof glass. They didn't have the armor. I mean, the poor guys that hit Normandy, I mean, the only thing they had between them and the NG-42 or the NG-3 was the ramp, you know. And, you know, you think about things like that, and just you know, the carnage that goes into war and what happens, you know, you find a sense of, yeah, there's things that are worth it. Then you look at it and you're like, wow, you know, that's pretty devastating to all the families. You know, I've Stone Cypher and Edmonds were 2 friends of mine. They were in my platoon. They got killed. Christian Kilpatrick was a student at San Rafael High in Rancho Cotati. He was a good buddy of mine. He got killed in Iraq in 2004. We had his funeral, and actually here at the mortuary here, and then we buried him in Sebastopol. Tim Shea was another Ranger that was killed. Ironically, he went to the same company and the same platoon that I was in. I'd never met him, but he went to St. Vincent's High School. When he had his funeral, I went to it, and the guys from my platoon were there. They were pallbearers, and my old company commander was there. And then I had the honor of meeting his mother. I explained to her that I'd been in his old company's old platoon, and his squad leader was a private in my squad when I was just back from Ranger School. So it was it's just a small world. I know that, and Kilpatrick was in the same company with me too. We were actually on the Kitty Hawk at the same time when the war started. Before he got killed, he called me that January, because he was killed in May, and got on the phone and said he was going to buy a house in Petaluma, not too far away from where I live. And because he'd come home from leave, he'd come over to my dad's house and have some beers and some, you know, little pop of this and that, you know. And when he was killed, you know, he had called me before and said, hey, you know, I'm going to go do some contracting. I'm going to get a little bit of money and come home and be able to put a down payment or whatever on the house. So he told me on the phone. I was in Texas at the time. And I said, well, good luck, bud. I said, hey, when you get in town, give me a call. I'll have a beer, you know, whatever. And next time I found out he was dead. He got ambushed and was killed by a small arms fire. You know, his parents lived in Vernon Park, and you know, on Memorial Day, I go up every year, Memorial Day, and I'll bring McGinnis and some Jameson and put it on his grave, and I'll have a drink with him. And my girlfriend Lisa came with me this year, but I go every year. You know, Memorial Day, there's not very many people there. There's a few. You see them, and you see the flowers, and you see the you know, they leave gifts and this and that and the other. But you know, I make it a point that I go have a drink with him, you know, once a year on Memorial Day. I haven't seen his mom Patty in a while, but you know, a really nice lady. But it's a rough thing. It was one of the roughest things that we had to go. Me and my buddies from Fort Benning came out, and we went up to Runner Park to his house, to his dad's house, and we came in with a gift for his father in memory of his son. And, you know, that's the hardest thing. You see the parents, and you know, they lost a child. You know, you lose a buddy, but they lose a child, and you know, it stays with you. You know, and I mean, it was kind of a, you know, you talk about how Iraq, you know, you're happy it's over, but at the same time, it's kind of a bittersweet thing, because you know, well, that's where he was killed, now it's done. You know, it's like he'll always be in my memory, but the war is done. And I don't know if anybody else, a veteran in here, kind of knows what I'm saying. When the end of war comes, it's kind of like a just sad, but happy but sad time, because you're like, now they're put to rest, it's done. Like when the war kept going, you kind of felt like they were still there even though they were gone. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but you know, it's kind of like that, you know. But
What sort of stuff is being done now to reintegrate combat guys back into civilian life?
well, they got to
Is it
support.
adequate is really the question.
Yeah, it depends. They have support systems now that they've never had before. After you know, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, they were pretty much, they hit the street and they were on their own. And now they have support systems. I know, for instance, here at the engineer battalion and at the engineer company, they have dedicated counselors and psychologists that you can go to during your training, or even afterwards, that can help you. And there's a lot of support that goes into that. Man, I'm not gonna lie. I see a counselor. You know, how can I not? You know, it's not anything to say it's a sign of weakness. Like, all right, fine. You know, a Green Beret Ranger, I'm weak. You know, because I go, go talk to somebody. I do, and I would eventually, I would tell people that that are hesitant to do so. Hey, if I can do it, you can do it. You know, and you got great counselors here locally that would help you. That help anybody out. And to include, I saw there was a kid that came in that was trying out for special forces, and some of the questioning was came on kind of strong, because he had some PTSD, and he was afraid to tell me what was going on. I said, look, buddy. I go, you don't need to call me sergeant. My name is Jimmy. Sit down. I go, you just came back. You came back from war. You had a traumatic experience. I go, what happens is with the bruises in your brain, you can't see it like you have a black eye. I go, you got to heal. I go, if you're ready to come here, fine. If not, I'll help you find somebody that you need help with. I go, we're all from the same team. How can I forsake you just because, you feel badly about what you saw when you were there? I go, if you didn't, there'd be something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're like any other human being, And he thanked me for it, because he said that a couple other sergeants that, gave him a rough time because you don't want to talk to him about it. But I gave him my card. I've had a couple conversations with him, and he's moved on. He's been successful. But the support system's there. And if a sergeant or a commander is worth a damn, then they themselves will help somebody out. They'll go out of their way to help that person. And they'll get them the help that they need. They'll take them themselves, the person, to help out. And if, it's just the way it is. Yeah.
Would you agree that PTSD diagnosis should be more correctly termed a stress disorder rather than a mental illness?
Well, I say...
What I mean by that, a
it should be
stress
called-
disorder can
yeah.
last for a short time, or it can last for a long time.
I think it's called post-traumatic stress, because it'll stick with you. I don't think it's so much a disorder as it is, it's normal. Like anybody could have I mean, you could walk out on the street here with a child and you get hit by a car, you're going to have that the rest of your life.
Right.
So it's a scar. It's something that you have, you carry it with the rest of your life, and you just need to know how to deal with the times that you say it gets hot and it gets cold, because those times are going to come up. But I don't necessarily see it as a disorder. I see it as a stress that comes and goes just like any other stress, but it's magnified more because of the violence of what you may have seen or what you went through in such a short time. It's very impactful. Do I make sense with that?
Yeah, I'm just working with a couple of groups, and we're trying to work out how to reach the new vets. And when we mention the word mental illness, a lot of the families get very upset, and we feel that we're not reaching some of the vets.
Well,
because of-
if you rephrase it to just say that they're post-traumatic stress, that they work with the effects, the cause and effects of war,
Right.
that might be a little bit more of a different angle to go about it. Because if you walk up to somebody and say you got mental illness, they're gonna like, hold on a minute, and it's not a mental illness. It's like I said, it's a bruise. It's a bruise of the brain, and it's a bruise of the psyche, and it's healable. It'll still be there, but as long as you have a good support system, and you're not afraid to ask for help, then there's things that are out there. I'll tell you right now, the best support system that I could possibly say for being a vet is joining the VFW or the American Legion, or for Vietnam vets, the Vietnam Veterans Association. You're around your own peers, and you're around people that you can identify with, whether they were in war or not in war, but they served, they were in uniform. So you can, you know, you can approach them or they can approach you. Mr. Sharkey?
And what Vietnam veterans did, because when we came home to, we have a motto that we changed it. Never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. And so that Iraqi and Afghan veterans coming home can be part of even our Vietnam veterans chapters. And that, so that when they all come home, they will have something to reference to start their own groups. You know, I heard you talking about PTSD. I retired in 1973. Even today, and I had back-to-back tours to Vietnam, even today if I see something on TV that's relating to war, it still affects me. PTSD will last you forever. Will last you forever. The hard part for me was to see children being hurt. And to this day, that still bothers me. And I'm sure there are other Vietnam veterans here in the room, they will say the same thing. It never goes away.
I mean, to follow up on what you just said too about seeing things, you know, well, I don't know, you've said to me, Lisa, that, you know, if I watch something that has to do with anything like the war, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, even today, wherever, you know, the wars that are going on, it's just I don't know, you say that I get a certain look on my face. I don't realize it. I just watching TV, you know, but you get put into a certain place and that's just the way, you know, you're going to have it the rest of your life. You're now part of a brother and sisterhood that you have no choice but to be a part of the rest of your life. You're part of it. You're in that family now. And there's nothing that really you can do about it but approach your peers and your brothers and your sisters in arms, your fathers or grandfathers, and learn to deal with it. Because, you know, the next generation, there's going to be a war. And in my opinion, there's always going to be war in the earth as long as there's human beings. And it's to, you know, you can strive for peace, you can strive for whatever, but the point is, kids that are in elementary school now are going to have their conflicts. Unborn kids are going to have their conflicts. You know, and as a country and as a people, we need to understand that we need to prepare for that. And unlike other times in history, and every generation is guilty of doing it, and probably our generation will be guilty of it too. You forget, you get complacent, and then all of a sudden you get punched in the stomach again, and it starts all over. It starts all over again. You know, in 2000, hey, are we gonna have a war for 10 years? No, I didn't think so. It was the 80s and 90s were pretty. You know, there was conflicts that went on, but we were, you know. And then all of a sudden, bam, 2 buildings get hit, 3,000 Americans get killed, and 4 planes, and then all of a sudden now, we're in a sustained situation of combat for 10 years. You know, the Vietnam veterans in the back, and, you know, and other veterans that are injured, probably, am I kind of hitting it on the head, or am I, you know, kind of understanding, like, every generation gets a little bit complacent, you know, and then it leads to the next one. But anybody have any other questions or comments or anything they need to know? Is that it?
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to Jimmy.